What if the world's second largest economy simply stopped? Japan did exactly that, and it wasn't for 1 year, or 5, but for 30. And the real reason has almost nothing to do with what you learned in economics class. By the late 1980s, Japan was the envy of the world. Its GDP growth was explosive, its companies dominated global markets, and its people were getting rich at a speed that seemed almost supernatural. The Nikkei stock index hit 38,915 points on December 29, 1989, a peak it would not see again for over 3 decades. The bubble was built on land. Japanese banks, flush with cash, lent enormous sums against skyrocketing property values. Corporations used inflated land as collateral to borrow even more. At the peak, the Imperial Palace grounds in Tokyo were theoretically worth more than the entire state of California. It was a tower built on air. Then the Bank of Japan raised interest rates to cool the speculation. What followed was not a correction, it was an implosion. Stock prices collapsed by 50% in 2 years. Land values fell for 15 consecutive years. Japan's banks were suddenly sitting on mountains of loans that would never be repaid, what economists call zombie debt. Here is where Japan's story diverges from every other financial crisis in history. Normally, banks write off bad loans, companies restructure, and the economy resets. Japan did none of that. Banks kept lending to insolvent companies to avoid declaring the loans as losses. These companies, the zombies, kept operating without profit, without growth, and without dying. The deeper cause was cultural. In Japan, admitting failure, whether as a bank, a company, or a government, carries profound social shame. Firing employees, closing businesses, and writing off losses all meant losing face. So instead of painful reform, Japan chose slow suffocation. Deflation set in, and a devastating trap clicked shut. Falling prices meant consumers waited to spend, which crushed demand, which lowered prices further. The government spent $20 trillion on stimulus packages, bridges, roads, and public works that were sometimes built and rebuilt just to generate activity. It became known as throwing money into a black hole. Interest rates were cut to zero and stayed there. But when people expect prices to keep falling, no interest rate is low enough to make them spend today. Japan's lost decade became 3 lost decades, a cautionary tale about what happens when denial outlasts crisis. Today, economists see echoes of Japan's trap forming in China, in Europe, and in others who mistake stability for strength. The real lesson of Japan is not about interest rates or bailouts. It is about what a society will sacrifice to avoid admitting it was wrong.